So you guys are welcome to a copy of the recording as well.
Cool.
And it would appear that we are recording now. So I think I'll let you guys first give an introduction to your, tell us your names and what you're doing, and then go ahead and we will go ahead with a discussion and an open kind of forum this afternoon. So whoever would like to start, please go ahead.
Sure. So I'm David Nordfors, and I run a network called I4J, Innovation for Jobs. And Deborah is a part of it, and also a number of other thought leaders. I run it together with my co-founder, who is Vint Cerf, who is the co-inventor of the internet. When people talk about the father of the internet, they refer to him. And the idea here is that we discuss, while others discuss, will automation kill all jobs? We discuss, how can innovation create good jobs? Because that's the interesting question. And yeah, I guess that's basically it. We got great discussions and we got a lot of ideas, and I hope to share some of them with you today and get your feedback on them. Hallie.
So my name is Hallie Grundwag, and I have background in education and psychology, counseling psychology mainly. And I'm working with David at I4J as a psychology advisor, and my baby there is a project called Cool Abilities. And I think this is very relevant for you guys. I don't know if Deborah told you a little bit about Cool Abilities and what they are, but this is what I would like to talk to you about, and to actually gather your insights after I present for you what Cool Abilities are, and what do you think, and how it is applying to you as students, as thinkers, and as people who are perhaps having jobs already, or are going to have jobs, and who are designing especially. So I'd like to hear your thoughts about that. Deborah, how would you like us to distribute the discussion?
Hallie, the students have read the Cool Abilities white paper. I made that available to them. And right now, what we're doing this week is, and I probably am like outing them. I just gave them the assignment, so they're just starting on it. But we are doing the Play IT project, which I discussed with you guys a little bit. Play IT came actually, interestingly, out of an NSF call years ago. And I don't know if you guys go back that far with the NSF. I would say about maybe 8 to 10 years ago, the National Science Foundation had a big push wanting to collaborate with designers. And they had a special funding stream. Well, back in the day when we used to have federal funding, there was a funding stream called Play IT. And the gist of that was looking at information technology and the internet and different uses of technology in design forms, right? And I attended many of those seminars. They had 4 or 5 across the nation, with NSF chairs hosting them at places like Stanford, hosted some, IIT, and Northwestern in Chicago hosted some, and around the country. And so I picked up on that even long after they disbanded the funding for reasons of unknown. And now we're doing the Play IT project, which is meant to look at 2 groups of people, NTs, neurologically typicals, and a person with a cognitive disability such as autism, epilepsy, cerebral palsy, something of that nature, and then design for those 2 groups to play as equals. And so the Cool Abilities idea is very, very closely related.
Yes.
Yeah, and this week we are particularly looking at ways of ethnographic observation of persons with autism using internet resources and something I call the connectivity model, which looks at a social, emotional, behavioral, physical, and motivational parameters on observing ethnographic, those kids in context. So that's what these guys are doing. So,
awesome.
yeah. So that's why we want to talk to you today.
Cool. Well, so if I can pick up on that, I suggest we discuss it from the perspective of this play IT task, right? So you say you got neurotypical, and then you got some guys who have a diagnosed disorder, right? A disability. And how do they play equal? And so I would like to pick up on that word equal, because many would think that equal means that, okay, they should be able to do the same, normal tasks. So you think about the people with the disabilities, right? Mm-hmm. And how can we help them so that they can do the normal tasks and then they're equal, right?
Yeah.
And I think the cool abilities approach is it's the same but the opposite. So, so the question is rather, if we look at the guys with the disabilities, how are they different, right? Because often a disability comes with what we call good ability, which means that they're actually better at something. Neurotypical.
David, can I break it to you? And I'd like to say, instead of better, I'd like to introduce the term of enhanced ability.
Right.
And enhanced ability doesn't necessarily, I don't want to put a value on it of better or worse or good or bad. I would just like to say that if something is low, something else is high. Mm-hmm. So let's say that perhaps your social interaction is on the low, but your attention to detail and focus is high. Or perhaps your reading, right? If you're a dyslexic, maybe your reading is on the low, but your general view of the world, how you picture things, is on the high. Mm-hmm. Or another thing, enhanced ability can be the disability itself is an enhanced ability. So let's say that in terms of autism spectrum disorders, especially high functioning autism, you have, some people call it wrongly, a narrow interest in one topic, right? But we can call it actually that the person is really an expert in one topic. So is it narrow, or is it really a broad and deep knowledge in one topic? So it's a question of definition, and this is something that when one designs a toy or a game or anything, one should think about that as not how we normalize, how we turn somebody into a normal, but we tap into the strength of that person, and we tap into the strength of the other person so that they can both enjoy the play, if it's something that is for play together, if you want to foster that. But one can keep in mind also that the toy can be something that fosters one's own interest. And many, if you look at people, many people love playing by themselves. They love it. There's nothing wrong with that.
So what Charlie is saying here is that, usually you could say people take a weakness-based approach. Let's fix their weaknesses. And the cool abilities kind of suggests, why don't we take a strengths-based approach, right? I'm going to share a screen now and show a table that actually Charlie put together for this paper that you read. And I guess you can see this now. And, you can imagine that we have this kind of, here we have disabling conditions, right? And you can imagine that we've got many, many more columns here. We haven't done that research yet, but imagine that you have lots of columns for all the
blindness.
And then on the first row, you have the disabilities, and those are the ones we know about, right? And those are the ones that usually, with your type of mission, you would say, okay, how do we fix those? And on the second row comes this stuff that actually nobody has systematically listed. It doesn't exist, a systematic list for all these things. And that's why cool ability is a new word. We give a word to all this. So here you have somebody with autism spectrum disorder, right? Here are the things that they often are bad at. And here are some things that they often are good at, right? So you could say like this, how do we make these people equal? Well, okay, so we got to fix something that helps them just survive with that stuff. But how do we make them shine with this? Because equality can mean that people are different. They're worth as much, but in different ways, which is actually much more fun. So the cool ability approach would be you find some guys that they can't do something, try to find what they really have a potential to do that isn't used, and then find a new way, design a way to put that in play, so that these people become equally valuable to others. I would suggest that. I would just like to, because this is a very important part, and this slide is a bit messy because it comes from the paper. I just want to, if anybody has any questions here to Fanny or me, I think here's a good place to give it, because it will be, this is key. This is key, the table you're looking at now. Deborah, do you think everything is clear?
Yeah, I think this has a lot of actual clarity, and some examples of how this has worked out is that, for instance, a child on the spectrum, even a very low functioning child, ages 2 and 3, you might find can do a 50-piece puzzle.
Yes. Right?
Smack out of the box. Bam, bam, bam. And at the same time, a typical child is using the knobby ones with little handles, and they're doing a 10-piece puzzle. And other examples is sometimes we've had students that were very, very good with details. So the whole idea of memorizing every aspect of every train ever made, right, is easy for them. But for a typical child, conversation is easy. And so a game that coordinated both a high level of knowledge about a subject as well as maybe socially negotiating the knowledge had a challenging piece for both parties. Yeah. So the typical child couldn't memorize as quickly or as easily, but the child on the spectrum had trouble initiating conversation.
Yeah, and what I would love your students to do is to imagine how, I don't know if you're designing toys or if you have any age in mind or what do you have, but when you, personally, I'd like you to think about how you were at that specific age that you're designing to, so really get into the experience of what it was for you and what were you interested in, and which traits do you have in your personality that perhaps tap into these. You don't have to have a diagnosis, but if you recognize something in yourself that perhaps you're not diagnosed with ADHD, but you're a jumpy kind of person who's interested in many things at the same time, and you like to touch this and this and this and that. So what would it be like to instead of try to make that person focus into a task, to make a toy that brings this touching everything or moving from one thing to another into a fun activity that is not seen in a negative, necessarily in a negative perspective.
Yeah.
So maybe we just can look at this table and then give examples, because I think, we talk about examples. This is the best way to understand. So I could start with myself, So I was diagnosed with ADD 2 years ago. And, I chose to do the diagnosis because for various reasons, came out positive. And then when Shally made this table, what can I see here about myself? Yeah, it's... this is pretty accurate, but what really is interesting is that actually all this is accurate for me too, and that these things that I thought were very very unique for me, turns out that another kind of small fraction of people will have this too. So when I meet other people who kind of share my experience, and I can almost see it in their type of being, it often turns out that, they've got these strengths too. So for example, I got through college without reading straight through a whole course book, right? And because I couldn't keep the attention on one book. So the way I kind of invented the method that I took old exams that were available, and then I did them before I read the book, and then I went to the book and I found I found what I needed to find in order to do the problem, right? And I always felt bad about that because I felt kind of like cheating or the easy way out and so on. But then I realized, well, it was a way of learning and it worked for me. And of course, there were a lot of things that I didn't learn that way. I only learned the stuff that they actually had in the tests. But it worked, right? So it was okay. And now when I look at, how I've built my career now and what I'm doing today, I've actually managed to leverage on these things. Mm-hmm. So, I kind of shaped my own job. But because, if you go down here and here are jobs where that I should be good at, right? Actually, I am these
doing
things.
Many of those.
Yeah. So, but it's like, I think the thing is here that we're talking about small minorities of people that usually nobody has consciously created professions for. And Shally, maybe you can talk about the computer industry now, and because this is actually the first case, I think, where they're specifically creating high-skilled professions for a certain group with disabilities and cool abilities.
Yeah, sure. So I think that of all the conditions that are in the tablet, but also in others, the most researched one in terms of cool abilities, which are not named this way, is the autism spectrum disorder, and it's the high functioning one. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at this population specifically, you find out that their cool abilities are attention to details, pattern recognition, high focus, lack of social interest is a cool ability in this sense, in some of those professions. So some people who happen to be parents to children with autism spectrum disorder, they noticed those strengths and started mainly forming non-profit organizations that train people on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum, to be, to be programmers, quality assurance, technical jobs. There is a very, very interesting project in the Israeli army that works with people on the autistic spectrum. They screen those soldiers and let them work in very, very advanced programming and optical mechanisms of advanced
Well, if you say the name of them, I'll Google and I'll find the page and I'll show it while you're talking.
Found the page of.
Yeah, of the guys you're talking about.
Well, first of all, you can show specialisterna.
Yeah, all right. I have specialisterna here, so just a sec. I'll share the screen.
That's interesting. So,
yeah, share screen. Let's see.
I don't think that the IDF unit, it's an intelligence unit. I don't know if they have a website.
Right. But here we have Specialisterna. It's a company, right, where, you know, the foundation enable 1 million jobs to people with autism and similar challenge, right? And they work with SAP, which, you know, is a big software company. And
with Cisco.
Yes. Let's see, Autism at Work, SAP, is no, diversity and inclusion. Yeah, okay. Well, how about that? We take that.
Wow.
So they kind of have this guy who also is in I4J together with Deborah and us. He's called Feroz, and his son has autism. So he started hiring some guys with autism, even they didn't have degrees. Turned out they were ace programmers.
Yeah.
So they started the program at SAP called Autism at Work, and they decided that 1% of all their employees are going to be employed through this program. So their problem now is not, you know, how to manage their autistic employees. Their problem is how to find new ones. They've employed 200, they want to have 200 more, and, you know, where can they find these guys?
Yeah, so if you're thinking about how to design for cool abilities, or how to find professions for people with cool abilities, you can even broaden the, I suggest to take anything that you find as a disability. It can be hearing impairment or visual impairment, and see what is the upside, or what are the enhanced abilities of people with certain conditions.
Yeah.
So you would find, for example, and that might be very interesting for design, that a person with a hearing impairment, their visual sense is heightened, and the sense of touch, right? The sensory is heightened. So what would a toy look like, or any product in that sense, any design for a person like that would be?
Yeah.
Or exactly on the opposite. Think about a job where being deaf is a big plus. Let's say that a person works in a really noisy environment. It's great to be deaf there.
Yeah, right. So, and here's a very interesting case.
This is actually a case. Would you like to tell about the case, Davey?
Yeah, sure. So this is something called echolocation.
No, I'm talking about the case in India.
Ah, right, Feroz. Yes. So Feroz again, the guy with the autistic kid who started Autism at Work, and so he was head of the research lab in India, and they had their own power plant, because in India, you know, the grid isn't reliable, so companies should have their own power plants. And they're big, very noisy diesel generators, very unpopular place to work. They're extremely noisy. They have problems finding people who could stay for more than just a few months. And then he got the idea, why don't we employ deaf people? so he started employing deaf people, and they loved the job. There was not a problem. So that would be another contextual cool ability, right? Because their deafness, which is normally is an impairment, becomes becomes an enhanced ability. And here is something actually that we would call a singular cool ability, because it doesn't depend on context. It's an ability that appears just in some kind of weird way. So blind people, I mean, they still have a visual cortex in the brain, right? And the visual cortex has lots and lots of neurons. It's a big part of the brain. And of course, the brain is smart. So it doesn't just leave this part of the brain doing nothing. It just reassigns the neurons, right? So it happens with blind people sometimes that it reassigns that part of the brain to hearing, right? So instead of having three-dimensional sight, they get, these sight analytic qualities, but on sound. So they become like bats, they can click their tongues and they actually see the room, right?
Like an ultrasound.
Exactly. So here's a guy, they've written about this in Science magazine, for example. Here's a guy, he's blind and he's riding a bike, so he uses clicks and echoes to ride the bike down the street. Right? So you could imagine that you could design a job for these people that, I don't know, work in caves or somewhere where there is absolutely no light. You could think about some environment where these guys might even, see better than ordinary people because there's no light. Or you could think about some place where maybe sound goes through a paper thin wall where light does not go through. And blind people would just be able to kind of have a sense of what's on the other side of that wall that seeing people would not have, and so on, right? It's only the imagination sets limits to what you can do with these singular cool abilities. And you can't go to any book and find, I mean, this is like an ideal design thinking task, right?
So when I started to do the research, I found research about autism. I found some research about ADHD and a little bit about this and a little bit about that, but there wasn't any umbrella concept that says, hey, there are enhanced abilities for all of these conditions, because our models are based on pathology, on what is not working, what we need to fix, what is wrong, but not at what is, and everything that is wrong, it's like a mirror or the yin-yang symbol. Everything has both. So if you have a minus, you should have a plus. Any principle in life is like that. I'm really curious to hear students' thoughts, if you have any. If you don't, this is a lot of new information. So yeah. I don't expect you to know, or to just, if it resonates with you, if it doesn't resonate with you, why does it make you, I mean, how does it make you feel, this whole concept is
right. I think this is probably a good time to start a discussion. And just as a last comment, I can tell you that I used to never tell people that I had ADD, who wants, it makes me even less employable than I already am, right? But now with this idea of cool abilities, it's kind of okay for me, feels okay for me to talk about it, because I can say that it comes with strengths, right? So I don't know if this is maybe a good time to open up a discussion where, we can just play, either you have questions, or maybe we can just play with some ideas that you can, maybe you have a cool ability, maybe you have a friend who has a cool ability.
It can be just
just fantasize what kind of job you could design around that. And then we can discuss it. How about that?
Okay. would somebody like to either offer some observations, maybe discuss the toy or the condition you're designing for, or one of your abilities?
Okay.
Who would like to go first? I'm trying to see who we've got on here right now. Maybe Caitlin, do you have anything you'd like to, you've worked with this project now, this is your second time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So what I'm trying to design for this class is, my mic working? I know it breaks up sometimes. Okay. Is a little kind of soft flowing therapy kind of ball, I guess, or something to like have a kind of a calming environment. And it's this little light that you can kind of hold, and it has tactile feedback, and also they can turn it to whatever color or mood they're kind of feeling, like if they're feeling like a blue or a purple or whatever tone, and then it can project up onto the wall, kind of like the calming water, but they have the ability to control it easier with turning it, and then they can also like hold on to it if they feel like it's really soft, flowing light that they can put on their nightstand table. Do you guys have any suggestions or anything that might help me design it better?
I think it's a great idea. And I'm just wondering if you have in mind any specific population, or is it something that anyone can just enjoy, or do you want to tap into like more anxiety, or is it something that you want to tap into the more sensory part of a condition, or what led you to choose this? What is your motivation here?
So I've seen online that there are, so I guess I'm aiming towards anxiety and something to calm down anxiety with a lot of anxiety, because I've seen online that there are like these weighted blankets and stuff where like pressure kind of helps relieve that. And I'm thinking like, well, I've also seen those lights where they project this feeling in the room. And I really like the idea of like, just like creating a more calm environment, but they have control over it. And that one seems like it only has, maybe it'll have one or two, like it has the ocean or something, and maybe it only has one or two settings. But I like the idea of like something that they can toss around more. So it's not like so fragile. And mostly it's for anxiety is what I'm going for.
That's great. So what I understand is what you're trying to, I see that now. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So what I understand from what you're saying is that you're trying to tap into the sensory realm of anxiety.
Yeah.
Right? So because anxiety is a feeling in the body,
yeah.
And you want to get into that part in the body that is anxious and make it feel better, right? Make it feel less anxious.
Yeah.
Or calm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you're on the right track, and it can be very different for different people. That's not the sensory of the sense of anxiety goes like this, right? It goes like it's like a mountain. It kind of goes up, and it reaches like a top, some kind of a climate, and then it goes down, hopefully, or it stays there for a while, but eventually it goes down. This is how anxiety works. It's like a wave. So I really like the way you're getting the water and the waves in that, because it can, I mean, metaphorically, it's very good too.
So
but so I think that you're on the right track with distraction and with trying to tap into the sensory part. And then I would like to ask, I mean, what is it in this toy or in this device that is calming, and what part of it can perhaps create create more anxiety, if there is. So that's something in it is actually is triggering. David, go ahead. I see that you're eager to.
No, I'm also, what I'm curious about is, you know, do we know any cool abilities that come with anxiety? I mean, you know, is it something that people who you know, suffer from anxiety might be better at? And because you know, you're tapping into the mind-body connection, right? So it's often kind of a sensitivity in the body. I don't know if it leads to some kind of insights or something like that that enable. Shally, you know this better than me. You're the practitioner.
I can talk about the cool abilities of anxiety if that's of interest.
Sure. Yeah.
So as you know, anxiety is something actually that is really important, because without anxiety and without fear, we would all, in the old days, we would all be jumping over the woolly mammoth. And then who would be there to think, hey, this is actually really dangerous. If everybody were this type A person who jumps over and attacks, the anxiety has a very important part of protecting us, and of thinking, and of not jumping into a situation right away. That's the function of anxiety. Anxiety is a really important mechanism. It's when the anxiety gets out of hand that it becomes what we call a disorder. But it gives a lot of I mean, the warning signals and the sensitivities really also it's an important part of the human experience. And that's I think something we don't want to take away anxiety at all. We don't want to diminish anxiety. Anxiety is important for our existence. Yeah, it's there for us. It's when it takes over that we suffer from it. Yeah. David, do you want to add something? I mean,
yeah,
is there anyone here who doesn't suffer from anxiety? I don't belong to that group.
No, we haven't listed any cool abilities that come with anxiety. I think it would be really interesting if one could, because, you know,
yes,
that's incredibly valuable.
Stepping back, observing comes with anxiety.
So, I mean, you know, I would, so now you've done a very important thing to help people with anxiety to kind of stay cool in certain situations by using the mind-body connection. Next step, I would think, okay, can I find somewhere, you know, something that it seems that people with anxiety generally are better at? And maybe they don't need to be anxious in order to be better at it. Maybe, you know, maybe you can calm the anxiety and they're still better at something else because it's just something neural or whatever, right? And then add to the ball, you would add them to something that, okay, now we calm this guy down. Now we add this thing that makes them, that kind of lifts them up with this enhanced ability that they have, and you know, then they're actually going to be pretty well off because they're going to be calm and better than other people on something, right?
I want to tap into the contextual, because anxiety and excitement are the same feeling in the body.
Right.
It's the context that makes the difference. It has the wave, the elevation, and the up and the down is the same for anxiety and excitement. And I think that this is something that can lead us to think about cool abilities.
Yeah. Caitlin's idea is nice because it puts some control back in the hands of the person experiencing anxiety. And, you know, anxiety is a component of so many other situations. Persons with autism, whether high or low functioning, I think all of them experience anxiety to degrees. And some have lesser ability to verbalize it and to And so we
Right.
see this, sometimes people have things that they use for self-stimulatory behaviors, the stimming and the things like that, which are probably a calming mechanism, but she's trying to give them something more controllable, you know?
Which is great.
Yeah,
I love your idea. I think you should go with it, and I don't think I have anything to add to it. I think that it's the more you, I mean, my idea is to go with your guts there.
Yeah.
And to follow your heart, because this is where good design comes from.
I'm thinking maybe if we go back to the table that you made, Hadi, and look at it, and maybe if we just say, let's look at people with autism spectrum disorder, and let's see if we can have a discussion around what could one do for these guys, something that is not, you know, what everybody thinks about, computer programmer, okay? So, because the other things that one can do well as well. And if somebody takes over talking here, I'll try to find that table again here and show it to you. And maybe we can have, you know, we can fantasize some ideas.
Would somebody like to offer another project you're working on?
Or thoughts around projects and brainstorm a project. Like if you maybe you didn't start yet, or you have something in your mind and that's still cooking and you don't know where to take it.
Antonio Garcia, you had a great one. Do you want to offer some discussion of what you're doing?
Is it still on?
Yeah, I think so. Who else? Anybody else? I'm open. Antonio had a really cute one with Play-Doh, actually, for younger kids. It was really cute. Let me see.
I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah.
I have 10 years of experience with very young people.
There you are. Hey, Antonio, do you want to tell us about your Play-Doh project?
An idea to create a game that would target users between the ages of 8 and 12, boys and girls, that would consist of...
Can't hear you. Mm-hmm.
Oh, can you speak louder?
Yeah. So I had an idea to create a game.
Or into the mic.
I'll just type it out.
I lost you. Yeah.
In the meanwhile, I found this table again.
I can't hear Antonia, so I'd love to hear, just to finish that thread. Maybe
I can speak a little bit to Antonio. Can you hear me? I read his. Antonio had a very nice project working with shapes and shape recognition and colors, and using cards and then Play-Doh to construct the shapes and then replicate the shapes that were on the cards using these materials. And he was looking at combining user groups that were maybe a person on the spectrum that was like maybe 8 to 10, and then other user groups that might be slightly younger but have greater skills, and looking at tactile and construction kind of strategies using Play-Doh as a building material.
Right. Well, my thought on that is, okay, so let's say you know that you're dealing with people who are more or less on the autism spectrum disorder.
Yeah.
And you know, we know that these are some cool abilities that occur. Now, I'm wondering, you know, if one could use this, this innovation to kind of measure these cool abilities. So we know how, you know, this guy, he's very good with this thing or that thing, so that you use that knowledge for mapping it, and then you can maybe better match teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you could use it for team matching, right? For talent development and team matching. So, you know, take the thing that if you make a test and then you see what they perform excellently at, and then you develop that thing and then you match them into a group. I mean,
Yeah.
What I like about, Antonio, about your project is that it taps into different kinds of learning, and that is also fun.
Yes.
So you have like if you learn with your hands, right? If you're a tactile learner, then it enables you to learn this way, and the colors are attractive for the visual, and if you're a sensory seeker, the Play-Doh just itself is, you wouldn't take your hands off the Play-Doh because you're a sensory seeker, so you will just be inside that realm of touching all the time, and and the shapes and the cards. So I like that part, that one can play with it together, and it gives an answer to different developmental stages.
Yeah.
So if you're more into the mushy part of playing with the Play-Doh, or if you're more into already in the shapes or patterns, that it's there. So it gives an answer to very many different, cool abilities and abilities in general for young ages, and also I see development as not something that is necessarily defined by age, so it gives for different stages of development. That's a great thing.
I was pushing him to include like little cookie cutter things to make the building block shapes. So maybe you have one child who is literally cutting shapes and then giving them to the other children who need them to build their objects. So there'd have to be collaboration, and maybe, maybe I just love that feeling of pushing that little cookie cutter into there. But I need to learn the colors and the shapes. So I had to do like a 2-term, like, okay, where's the star and where's the blue? Okay, who needs a blue star? Oh, you do. So I have to, use my language and my hands, and even constructing like the creativity. Maybe I'm not making anything. I'm making to see who can make the most complicated and beautiful thing. Who knows?
Right. So if the purpose of the game is to learn specifically shapes and colors and cards, that's the combination of that is great.
And I think there should be a mobile app where they can take pictures and make their own gallery. I mean, and these kids love technology. I'm pushing this class to go with the lowest functioning persons that have no language and would be perceived to not have much to offer. And so they literally draw out what are those, because maybe that one kid can cut those things all day and is just happy to do so,
I think that we would be very interested just in learning the findings, because this is just the beginning of work, and it can be pretty difficult to find these skills. I mean, if you get disabilities, they're listed in the DSM, right? But the cool abilities are not listed. And with so, I mean, just the stuff that you're doing now, I mean, we would be interested in learning. So if you could come back to us with knowledge like here, right? That would be great. And also ways, if you found ways how to apply that.
Yeah.
I mean, what you said about solving puzzles and stuff like that, of course, there's huge use for that.
Yeah, exactly. But we never tap into that, because if you can't express yourself with words or with math, we don't consider you to have much of value.
Yeah. So
I mean, there's a word that I really hate, and that's idiot savant skills. I detest that word. I mean, it's strike of genius. If these it's only because they're expected to know something else that
Yes.
they don't know, and therefore what they're really good at is not considered valuable for that reason. It doesn't make sense.
Yes, we're so overshadowed by what we can't do that nobody can see what we can do.
Right.
And I'm always struck by how when we start acquiring language, we lose empathy and we lose other body language abilities, or we seem to dismiss them because our language is supposed to be where we excel. So,
Right.
Yeah, and the language is only one part of our...
Well, maybe we will continue our discussion. Certainly, I wanted the students really to see, we have the paper and we have this list on it, but maybe we can ask students to expand on the list. What have they learned?
Yes.
I have a request. If one of the students is interested in doing something that actually taps into the enjoyment of classification and of putting things in a row and patterns, that it's actually, I mean, that it's actually a lot of fun for some people with autism, is just to put things in a row, one next to each other, or create a pattern that they see, or have that kind of, so making a game for something that is not enhancing the social interaction that is low, but is actually fun to do with some of the strengths. Because, okay, so what is fun for a person? Maybe a person with autism doesn't like interaction, and we don't want to enhance that because they will perhaps never be good in interaction, but they still want to have fun.
Yes.
Maybe you can make a puzzle with 1,000 pieces where all pieces are squares.
There are such things. It's very frustrating for some of us.
And I agree. I think we are not here to change people. We're here to empower people and to enhance their lives, not to make them what we see as some weird ideal. So I'm very much in tune with what you're saying.
But you know, okay, so that sounded like a joke I just made, right? Because it sounds to us that's completely impossible. It's a ridiculous puzzle. But you know, there are people who could solve that puzzle because they're good at matching the patterns.
Yes. Yes.
So maybe you know, and maybe that is a good puzzle to make if there are autistic people who can do that. I mean, how would you make a puzzle for them that is, just as difficult for them and enjoyable for them as a 1,000 piece puzzle is for people who don't have that ability, right? How would that look like? And that would of course be a good training game, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Our society has valued things that we do well, and things that we as neurologically typicals don't do well, we say they're not valuable. And there's a certain arrogance in that.
Well, it's language, that's one of the good things with a word ability, because if you call people disabled, you can say disabled people are good at some things. Well, you're already gone there because you called them disabled people.
Exactly.
You have to call people something else, right? So if you call them cool-abled people, and
just people.
well, you can call them just people, right? But exactly. But the thing is, if you call people disabled, then it's like you classify them by what they can't do, right?
Yeah.
And if you call people cool-abled, well, you know that, okay, there's something that they're weak at, but let's talk about their strengths.
Exactly.
So already by using that word, you kind of contain that here are people who are both weak and strong, right?
Yeah.
And we're looking at the strengths.
That's a great observation, David. And the idea of like a Likert scale of where is your strength with regard to focus? Because
right, exactly.
My strength in focus is like 0 because I'm all over the board. But
right.
My son's focus could be indefinite. And there are things where indefinite focus is a strength. And so it's a continuum in a sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we maybe have defined a new part of the project.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's so easy to just, there exists a language for disability, and, and people are very used to it. There's a lot of policy around it. And it's very easy to just slip into that.
Yeah.
So you start talking about cool abilities, and then you slip into talking about disabilities because that's what the existing language focuses on.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah. So how do you keep your eyes on the ball, so to say? How do you keep your focus on the cool ability when you develop things?
Yeah.
And how do you set your own mind so that you don't kind of slip into thinking people, oh, these poor sods, instead of, wow, this guy has an amazing ability. I maybe have to cover up some other stuff, because in order to reach that. There are many CEOs who don't know how to take the bus.
Wow. Well,
they're not called disabled. They just called eccentric,
You guys have been amazing today. I think I'm going to have to close our meeting. Do you guys have any thoughts that you want to give us as we, I guess, kind of sign off today? Anything come to mind, David or Holly?
Rock and roll.
Holly, any?
I think Kelly is trying to recharge her computer now because...
Bless her heart. We've totally drained everybody. We will continue our discussion with you, David, and certainly keep you updated on our project. We'll be working on this for a few weeks, and certainly anything that we can have as an ongoing discussion, or maybe update the I4J community on how this is progressing. We would love to be part of that further discussion.
So Shirley is heading, basically expanding this table. That is the beginning of something, and I think that she will certainly be very happy if anyone contributes to expanding this table.
Absolutely. Maybe there's a way we could, have some things on the web or stuff for people to respond to, or, anything as a discussion point. So great.
Right.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you so much. Thanks to the students who joined us, and thanks to you guys. This has been amazing. And I think this is where education needs to go. We need more of this kind of open discussion between research, industry, and our university students. So
absolutely.
Can't thank you too much.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for the students for being there and listening and developing your lovely brains.
Well, we're just excited where this can go. We will definitely keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you. All right.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.